A lonely nerd and a wild delinquent girl get abducted by aliens, possessed by ghosts, and now they're teaming up to battle the supernatural. Right at the start, in front of the school, Momo Ayasi's first boyfriend stops her in the middle of the street, telling her that she won't go on a date today unless she lends him some money. And to top it off, he demands that she pay for the biggest snack. Disgruntled, Momo tries to kick him in the face, but he dodges and, to make matters worse, hits her in the stomach. He starts insulting her, saying that he has no interest in girls who don't lend money or let loose anymore. Furious, Momo responds with a string of unconventional insults, which leaves her friends a little confused. Noticing the reaction, she feels misunderstood and complains that they should be on her side. After all, he was her first boyfriend. Instead of consoling Momo, her friends criticize her, reminding her that they always warned her that this kind of guy wasn't for her. A friend asks what she saw in him, and Momo, a little embarrassed, replies that he looked like the actor Ken Takakura. Her friends mock her for this, reminding her that guys like Takakura haven't existed for ages. Momo, discouraged, agrees and throws herself on the table, lamenting that she'll never find her ideal man. She starts walking through the school corridors, lost in her thoughts, and ends up seeing a group of bullies throwing paper balls at a nerd, trying to annoy him. Momo enters the room and interrupts, picking up the magazine the boy was reading. As she flips through it and realizes it's about aliens, she calls him pathetic and walks out huffing with anger, still frustrated. Shortly afterwards, the nerd appears behind her, curious, and says that Momo must be interested in what he was reading. After all, that alone would explain why she spoke to him. Momo, surprised, corrects the boy, saying that she wasn't trying to make friends. He ignores her and begins to explain that the article is about US presidents, who, according to him, have already met secretly with reptilians in a secret project called Project Pegasus. Momo Ayasa is not impressed by Okarun's conspiracy theories and makes it clear that she doesn't believe in aliens or UFOs. But Okarun, firm in his beliefs, insists and provokes her even more, saying that the United States itself has already recognized the existence of UFOs and has even created a space force to fight them. He starts reciting a series of theories from his magazine to Momo, making her impatient. Irritated, Momo explodes, saying that she doesn't have the patience to listen to this nonsense, especially after being dumped by her first boyfriend. She goes on to tease him, saying that this is exactly why he has no friends. After realizing that she had made a mistake, Momo apologizes, saying that although she doesn't believe in aliens, she does believe in ghosts. Okarun then teases her, saying that ghosts don't exist. Momo replies that her grandmother is a medium and that she has witnessed strange and intense exorcisms, with possessed people going through frightening convulsions. Okarun hits back, saying that these convulsions can have a medical explanation and that this doesn't prove anything. While the two of them are arguing, almost coming to blows, Momo's friends pass by and make fun of them, thinking that Momo is investing in nerds now. One of her friends even comments that she doesn't hate her new attitude. In the heat of the argument, Momo and Okarun make a bet. She says that if he proves the existence of ghosts, he will have to be her servant. On the other hand, Okarun says that if he can prove the existence of aliens, Momo will have to serve him. Momo heads to the hospital, famous for UFO sightings, while the nerdola heads to the haunted place Momo suggested. Although Okarun is very apprehensive about what he will find, he decides to face his fear to prove to Momo that ghosts don't exist. While each of them explores the place indicated by the other, they begin to talk and get to know each other a little better. Momo says that ever since she was a little girl, she made a specific gesture whenever she left the house, a practice that her grandmother, who is a medium, taught her. This gesture continued even when she went to school, where she was bullied, including by a boy she liked. Over time, Momo realized that she didn't feel angry because she had been mocked, but because this boy had ridiculed her grandmother's beliefs. Momo then asks Okarin what led him to believe in aliens. He refuses, saying that he has no specific reason, but then he starts to notice footprints made of something that looks like blood coming towards him. When he shines his flashlight around, he sees nothing, but when he turns around, he comes face to face with a frightening old woman. She mumbles something disturbing to Okarin. She wants to steal his marbles, man, leaving him terrified and running, trying to convince himself that she was just an eccentric old woman. As he runs, Momo warns him that there are legends on the internet about a figure called Grandma Turbo, and that he mustn't try to overtake her or he'll be cursed. But it's too late. The old woman catches up with him and he's captured. Realizing that he has lost contact with Okarin, Momo decides to go and check what is going on. On the way, all the lights in the hospital start to go out, and 3 strange figures appear, capturing her. These strange beings introduce themselves as Serpients, inhabitants of a planet called Sherpo. They try to calm her down, saying that they are friendly, but Momo is suspicious, especially when she realizes that they have removed her clothes. She begs to leave, but the aliens begin to explain more about their species, which is made up only of men. To maintain their population, they resort to cloning, but now they intend to use Momo to procreate and plan to study her body to discover a new way for their species to survive. Momo firmly resists the idea of the Serpients, who then decide to use a psychokinesis technique to manipulate her mental state and make her more receptive to their plans. In the middle of the process, however, Momo's cell phone rings. One of the aliens answers it, and surprisingly, Okarin and Turbo Granny appear on the screen, coming out through the phone. They quickly start attacking the Serpients. Soon afterwards, Okarin reveals himself, explaining that he has been cursed by Grandma Turbo. Momo sees him and asks him to help her, freeing her from the chair. Meanwhile, one of the Serpients looks intently at Momo's cell phone, fascinated by what he considers to be advanced technology unknown to them. Okarin then goes on the attack once again, but is pinned against the wall by one of the aliens. In an attempt to calm the situation, Okarin tries to negotiate, saying that he will do anything to get Momo to leave him alone. However, the Serpients reject him, saying that they prefer less violent humans and have a preference for women, not men. So they go back to using psychokinesis to try to control Momo's mind. During this process, she remembers a conversation with her grandmother, who always taught her a specific gesture for protection, saying that it prevented accidents and illnesses. Thinking of the mockery she suffered for following these family beliefs, Momo rebels and decides that she will never repeat the gesture, rejecting her grandmother's traditions. However, as she tries to push these memories away, Momo realizes that her mind continues to resonate with the power of that ancient tradition. Momo manages to free herself from the chair using only the power of her mind, reducing the Serpient's psychokinetic power. Feeling victorious, she regains confidence in her grandmother's traditions, correcting her previous words and stating that her grandmother had always been a true spiritist. She then expels the Serpients, sending them away. Suddenly, Okarin jumps on her, acting strangely, and Momo tries to bring him back to reality. Realizing that he won't get better, Momo performs a purification, separating Granny Turbo's spirit from Okarin's body. Even with the separation, the curse remains, and Turbo Granny explains that she took his cucumber, which means that he is still cursed. She challenges Momo, saying that if she wants her cucumber back, she must meet her in the tunnel. Granny Turbo leaves, ignoring Momo's requests to return what belongs to Okarin. Seeing the Serpient's ship crash to the ground, Momo admits that she now believes in aliens, while Okarin, for his part, says that he believes in ghosts, since he was cursed by one. Determined to get his precious cucumber back, Okarin wants to go to the tunnel immediately, but Momo insists on going along, explaining that he could lose control if the effect of his psychic power wears off. She instructs him to put on his clothes, but Okarun says that it's she who needs to cover up, as he can't face her like this. He makes a comment that he's kind of a weird guy, which reminds Momo of the phrase used by Ken Takakura, her favorite actor. She tries to disguise her sudden excitement and asks him his name. The boy reveals that his name is Takakura Ken. Momo is incredulous when she hears the name Takakura Ken and doubts that the boy is serious. However, he insists and reaffirms his name, leaving Momo even more surprised. She accidentally kicks him and makes him temporarily lose control of the curse, but he soon regains it. To avoid further confusion, Momo suggests that he doesn't use his real name when they are close, proposing the nickname Okarun, as it matches his fascination with the occult. Although he finds it strange, he decides to accept and introduces himself as Okarun when he is with her. As they continue, Momo realizes that it's already dawn and is relieved, as she believes that Grandma Turbo won't attack them during the day. She invites him to her house, but warns him that her grandmother is strict with boys and has almost eliminated her ex-boyfriend. When they arrive at the shrine, Okarun tries to enter, but an energy barrier stops him and he almost catches fire. Momo quickly notices an amulet on the pillars and, after deactivating the barrier, asks him to try again, assuring him that if he starts on fire, she'll throw him in the river. Reluctantly, he approaches slowly and, realizing that he is safe, finally enters. Momo laughs as she sees his hair stand on end from the shrine's energy, while he complains, asking for a little more empathy, as he has just faced great danger. Moving on, Momo calls her grandmother, but notices that the house is empty. She invites Okarun in, asking him to stay away while she changes. However, the curse strikes again, and he accidentally enters the room. Momo, already changed, offers him a coat and mentions that he should take a look at himself, remembering that Grandma Turbo cursed him and took something important from him. Taking a look at where his cucumber should be, Okarun despairs, realizing that he really has nothing. Momo insists on seeing, but he, totally embarrassed, shouts that he won't show anything. Momo, laughing, comments that he has nothing left to hide, and that he doesn't need to worry so much. Okarun, frustrated, accuses her, saying that if she hadn't made that bet, none of this would have happened. Momo corrects him, saying that he was never interested in these stories from the start. She reminds him that he was the one who kept talking about it, so deep down, he's also responsible for what happened. At this point, Okarun opens up and admits that he only continued the conversation because he was eager to make a friend, since he'd never had one before. He explains that he made an effort to interact with Momo, but soon realized that her world is totally different from his. Feeling out of place, he apologizes for involving her in this complicated situation, saying that she can ignore him once they've sorted it out. Momo replies that Okarun's tendency to jump to the wrong conclusions about others is what makes him push people away. She asks him to stop asking her to ignore him, as he still wants to talk about these nerd things. Okarun, uncomfortable, turns his face away, and Momo keeps pressing until he explodes, calling her reckless for exposing his weaknesses like that. In the middle of their discussion, they are interrupted by the sound of a doorbell. Okarun deduces that it is Momo's grandmother arriving, but Momo finds the noise strange, as she has never heard that bell before. She then remembers something her grandmother told her. The shrine has 2 bells, one for humans and one for evil spirits. Remembering this, Momo realizes that by removing the talisman from the entrance, she has left the place vulnerable. Okarun panics and asks what they should do. Momo takes the talisman and decides to put it back on the pillar. If it's an evil spirit on the other side of the door, it will burn when it enters. Okarun, fearing that he too will be burned, quickly moves away, while Momo scans the room for the spirit. Suddenly, they find themselves trapped in the shrine by a wall that covers the whole place. In a critical situation, Momo looks at the talisman and notices her nose starting to bleed. She notices a black mist in the air, which seems to be causing the strange effect on her and Okarun's bodies. Just then, a shadowy figure appears and accuses them of being people of bad faith, saying that they have broken a promise. However, it doesn't give any details about what they've done and starts chasing them, trying to hit them with its shadowy hands. Momo asks if that being is another spirit attached to Okarun, but he denies it, explaining that it is a type of alien known as the Flatwoods Monster, or 3-meter alien. He comments that there are studies suggesting that many people who see psychic phenomena also have a tendency to see UFOs. In other words, Okarun suspects that there may be some connection between ghosts and aliens. Noticing the creature in front of them, Momo realizes that it is related to the aliens they saw the night before. Desperate, she looks for something to dispel the poisonous mist that surrounds them, because if they keep breathing it, it's only a matter of time before they are severely weakened. Momo comments that she can't use her psychic powers properly while she's still keeping the curse under control in Okarun's body. Suddenly, Okarun regains consciousness, but notices that his left arm looks different. Seeing no other option, he decides to confront the creature directly, asking Momo to release his curse. She asks him why this sudden change, and he explains that if the enemy really is an alien, he won't hesitate to face it. He therefore insists that Momo release the curse, while still maintaining control over his mind. Momo is reluctant, explaining that she doesn't have a perfect command of her powers to fulfill his request at this level. But, seeing Okarun's determination, she decides to collaborate, even without guarantees. As soon as the curse is activated, he feels his body overflowing with immense power. On the other hand, he also begins to feel strangely depressed, uttering melancholy phrases. Despite this, he continues to prepare for the fight. When the enemy attacks by surprise, Okarun's body automatically dodges, avoiding the evil spirit's blow. Seeing this, Momo feels a growing sense of relief. Maybe now they really do have a chance of winning this battle. Suddenly, Okarun starts to feel strange, as if he's feeling sick, and the evil spirit takes advantage of this weakness to attack him, throwing him towards Momo in her human form. Okarun apologizes, explaining that his body can't cope with the overload of power from the curse. It's more than he can bear. And to make matters worse, he realizes that he has only managed to slightly injure the spirit, hitting only its fingers. This makes him think that victory is further away than ever. Observing the spirit's movements, Momo notices that it behaves like a sumo wrestler. She quickly formulates a plan. If they can make the spirit touch the ground with their hands, they can beat it, following the rules of sumo. With this in mind, Momo asks Okarun to focus on the spirit's feet, while she tries to knock it down with her psychic power. Working together, they manage to make the spirit touch the ground with one of its hands. As expected, that hand disappears, but the monster quickly recovers, returning to its attack position and pressing Momo against the wall. Okarun begins to lose control of the curse again, especially now that Momo is out of combat. Momo then extends her hands towards Okarun, taking control of the curse once again. She then turns her focus to the spirit, saying that he is cheating because, by touching the ground, he should have accepted defeat. Meanwhile, Okarun asks Momo to release the curse completely, saying that her only intention now is to defeat the spirit, regardless of the consequences for her body. But Momo insists, saying that she is already attacking the spirit and asks him to watch, as the spirit's trickery has angered her to the point where she wants to resolve the situation herself. The spirit, also angry, intensifies its attack. Okarun again asks Momo to release the curse so that he can fight the spirit evenly. Despite being in a dangerous situation, Momo stands firm and finally manages to place the talisman at a strategic point, causing the spirit to burn instantly. In this moment of relief, the two embrace. When they open their eyes, they realize that their view of the shrine has returned to normal. Momo feels relieved, as she believed they wouldn't make it out of the battle alive. Soon afterwards, however, Okorin begins to lose control again, and Momo has to activate her power once more. She notices that her hair is in a different style, and jokes that she preferred her previous cut, which was funnier. At the same moment, Momo feels dizzy and faints. With that, Okorin loses control again, and the curse of Grandma Turbo takes over his body once more. Meanwhile, Dodoria, a renowned psychic, is on a local talk show interrogating a young idol, asking questions that are not appropriate for her age. One of the producers wonders if it wouldn't be problematic to broadcast the show in this way, but another producer assures them that they won't have any problems, as the show's audience is limited. After finishing recording, Dodoria takes a cab to leave. The driver recognizes her from TV and, curious, asks if she really has psychic powers. Irritated by the question, Dodoria asks him to stop the car immediately, saying she's going to get off right there. The driver, realizing that he has made her uncomfortable, tries to apologize and explains that he just wanted to see her powers up close. Ignoring his explanation, Dodoria tells him to get out of there if he wants to stay alive. While walking, Dodoria comes across Granny Turbo attacking Momo in the middle of the street. Without hesitation, Dodoria advances against the spirit, driving a nail into her and revealing that Momo, the girl being attacked, is her granddaughter, who always seems to attract trouble. In the midst of the confrontation, Dodoria manages to lead Granny Turbo into a trap she has prepared, a circle of protection where any spirit that crosses the line will be instantly destroyed. Approaching Granny Turbo, Dodoria teases her, while the spirit angrily promises that it will devour her at some point, as it can't be kept trapped there forever. Dodoria, unperturbed, makes it clear that she doesn't just plan to keep her locked up, she intends to destroy her. With determination, Dodoria strikes Granny Turbo several times with the club, warning her not to try to go beyond the circle. Desperate, Granny Turbo warns that if she is destroyed, the human she is cursing will also suffer the consequences and could die. Even so, Dodoria, showing total disinterest, states that she has no compassion for those who deceive her granddaughter, and that includes even humans. Soon after this epic fight, Momo wakes up frightened in her room, thinking it was all just a bad dream. She rushes downstairs to see her grandmother, but is interrupted by Dodoria, who asks her to keep it down so she can concentrate on the TV. During the conversation, Dodoria discovers that Momo has been to a haunted place and questions what she was doing there. Momo explains that while talking to a friend, they decided to explore haunted places out of curiosity. Dodoria, however, seems more interested in the program she's watching and ignores Momo, which irritates her. She then asks where Ken Takakura is, whom Dodoria refers to as the boy. Dodoria replies that she has already taken care of the evil spirit, which worries Momo. But Dodoria, imitating her granddaughter, reminds her that she doesn't believe in ghosts and suggests that Momo shouldn't worry about such things, realizing that her grandmother still holds a grudge for what she said in the past. Momo gets down on her knees, apologizes, and asks what exactly her grandmother did to the spirit. Dodoria simply tells Momo to check the main hall of the shrine. Momo runs off, warning that she won't forgive her grandmother if something has happened to Ken. On the way, she begins to blame herself for everything that has happened, thinking that none of this would have happened if she hadn't called Ken into the cursed tunnel. When she gets there, she finds Ken safe and eating happily. Ken, on seeing her, begins to cry with relief, thinking that she could have died. In response, Momo slams the door and starts complaining, frustrated by all the needless alarm. Soon after, Dodoria appears and explains that Ken will be protected as long as he is confined to the house, as his curse won't manifest itself there. This makes Momo even angrier with her grandmother, because Dodoria had said that she had killed the spirit, which Momo interpreted differently. Dodoria then observes Momo's despair and raises the suspicion that the boy is more than a friend, perhaps a crush, given her concern at the thought of Ken being dead. However, Momo corrects her grandmother and explains that until Kente Kakura, Okaran, gets his amulet back, he will remain under Grandma Turbo's curse. Momo takes part of the responsibility for what has happened and decides that it is her duty to help him. Even after hearing the whole story, Dodoria continues to insinuate that her granddaughter has a crush on Okaran, but Momo brushes this aside and reveals that, since her experience with the aliens and a UFO, she now possesses psychic powers. Dodoria reacts skeptically, disbelieving the story of the aliens, and Momo understands her grandmother's reaction, since she herself only believed it after seeing it with her own eyes. Trying to prove her point, Momo demonstrates her psychic powers, using them to keep Okarun under control and prevent him from losing his mind due to the curse. Dodoria watches and says that they've messed with a really dangerous creature. She then explains more about the origin of Grandma Turbo, revealing that this entity is a modern yokai who has terrorized several regions. Dodoria tells us that she learned of Grandma Turbo's presence in the tunnel where Okaran entered, and when she got there, she felt such an intense energy that she couldn't even enter. She then explains the concept of bound spirits, ghosts that remain in specific places because of some powerful attachment. These spirits are practically invincible when they are in their own territories, and any sensible medium avoids confronting them in these places. She then warns Momo that in the case of that tunnel, Grandma Turbo has merged with the bound spirit of the place, making it even more dangerous. Dodoria suggests that Momo not get involved with this entity, pointing out that she has no direct obligation to solve Okaran's problem and should therefore put it aside for her own safety. Momo is in doubt about what to do, but when she thinks about what her idol would do, she decides that she has to help her friend Okaran. Dodoria, noticing her granddaughter's hesitation, teases her again, insinuating that she really is in love with the brat. Even though she can't dissuade her from going into the tunnel, Dodoria advises Momo to use a tag strategy with Grandma Turbo, since the creature relies heavily on her speed and will accept a challenge if provoked enough. Dodoria, however, warns of a problem. The bound spirit's territory is inside the city of Shono, so Momo will need to lure Granny Turbo out of the city in order to weaken her and stand a chance of defeating her. Momo, realizing the complexity of the plan, admits that her thin legs wouldn't help her run faster than Granny Turbo. She suggests that her grandmother place a talisman in the tunnel, but Dodoria explains that this is not possible, as she can only activate her barrier technique when she is inside the city, where she can borrow the power of the god who protects that place. To get around this, Dodoria suggests that Okaran carry Momo on his back, allowing her to focus on controlling the curse. Okaran, however, reveals that he can only run at high speed twice before he needs to rest. Upon hearing this, Dodoria decides that he needs to train until he can run non-stop. She then gives Okaran a strict training schedule and suggests that Momo train his psychic powers even more, as he will need at them to keep up with him. At the end of the instructions, Dodoria tells them to get a good night's rest, as the intensive training will begin the next morning. As he begins his training, Okaran feels the urge to go to the bathroom. Momo explains that if he goes in, she will lose control over the curse, as the walls will block her psychic powers. Dodoria, curious about how Momo controls the curse, asks how she does it. Momo explains that she can see an aura around Okaran. When she squeezes this aura with her hands, it disappears, allowing him to stay under control. Momo recalls the moment when she first awakened her psychic powers and felt invincible, but when she sees that she can only manipulate small auras, she realizes her limitation and feels discouraged. Dodoria then advises Momo to close her eyes, explaining that she relies heavily on sight to control the curse and must try to use all her senses. Meanwhile, Okaran, increasingly uncomfortable, tries to run to the bathroom. Momo tries to stop him, claiming that he doesn't have permission to use it, but without revealing that he actually wanted to go first. Okarun takes advantage of the confusion and shoots ahead, beating Dodoria and Momo in a close race. However, he has to use the toilet under Momo's watchful eye to prevent his curse from awakening at this critical moment. Meanwhile, Dodoria remembers Momo's confidence when she awakened her powers and reflects on the evolution and challenges her granddaughter faces in controlling this ability. Dodoria watches Momo with interest, believing that her granddaughter's psychic ability is intrinsic, although it seems to be sealed for some reason. She comments that Momo will need to strengthen this power over the course of her training. Reassuringly, Dodoria says that there is time for this, as Okaran will still take some time to develop sufficient physical strength. In the middle of the conversation, Momo looks away, and Okaran's curse escapes, with Granny Turbo taking control. She threatens Dodoria, offering a cruel choice: attack her with a heart attack or a stroke. Turbo then orders Momo to go to the tunnel later that night, under penalty of using Okaran to spread a curse like an epidemic. When night falls, Dodoria gives Momo and Okaran a protective vest against evil spirits. Watching them go, she advises her granddaughter to be careful. Instead of using the bicycles, they take the subway. On the way, Momo starts to take off her vest, and Okaran asks her, confused as to why she has removed the protection. She replies confidently that in fact, the Magaro only needs to be stylish in order to become stronger in its final version. At the entrance to the tunnel, Momo and Okarun argue about who should go ahead, throwing the responsibility on each other until Okarun suggests that they enter side by side, so that no one is unfairly treated. As they walk, Momo forgets Dodoria's instructions about meeting Granny Turbo. Okaran reminds her that they need to lure Granny Turbo out of Shono City and separate the evil spirit from her, which should weaken her and make the battle easier. Momo, remembering how they defeated the alien before, feels more confident, saying that the same should work with Turbo Granny since they were both powerful. Seeing this sudden courage, Okaran comments that just a few minutes ago, she was almost freaking out with fear. Momo, however, is dismissive, saying that Granny Turbo is just a ridiculous old woman and that they should be able to beat her without any problems. The next moment, they are surprised by the intimidating presence of Grandma Turbo, who makes Momo's courage evaporate instantly. Desperate, Okaran asks Momo to release the curse on his body. As soon as she does, depression hits, and he begins to feel negative, declaring that he is useless and unable to do anything to protect them. Momo, already used to Okaran's pessimism during his transformations, just ignores him, hoping that he will overcome the obstacle. However, when he begins to advance towards the enemy, the curse suddenly disappears, leaving them both confused and vulnerable. And then Granny Turbo reveals to Okaran that she has removed his curse, returning his lost amulet, and depriving him of any power. With no other option, Momo tries to remember the words of Seiko, who had mentioned that Granny Turbo is easily provoked when it comes to racing. The idea is simple. Just challenge her to a competition and let her take the bait. As she is almost swallowed up by the entity, Momo takes a chance and teases Granny Turbo, saying that she is only going for ignorance because she knows she would lose to her in a race. Momo challenges the entity, suggesting that Granny Turbo doesn't have the courage to accept. The bluff is clear to everyone except Granny Turbo, who convinces herself that she can catch them easily. She accepts the challenge and asks about the rules. Momo, without much structure, says that it's basically a game of catch. If Granny Turbo can reach them, she wins. The only rule is that the entity must count to 10 minutes before starting to chase them. But being who she is, Granny Turbo decides that 10 minutes translates into 10 seconds for her. As soon as the countdown is over, she captures Momo and advances on Okaran. At that moment, he, reflecting on how Momo always ends up saving the day, takes the initiative and, in a desperate act, bites Granny Turbo, promising not to let her go until she curses him back. The entity, annoyed, ends up giving in, returning the curse to the boy. Now, with his powers restored, Momo seizes the opportunity and gets Granny Turbo trapped in Okarun's body, allowing them to have some control over the entity. But while Granny Turbo tries to free herself from Momo's control, she summons the spirit of the place to attack them both, threatening them directly. They both manage to run out of the tunnel, but the crab-shaped spirit chases them. Okarun doesn't understand what's going on, and Momo explains that, according to legend, the dead take the form of freshwater crabs to cross the Sanzo River. Meanwhile, Granny Turbo continues to give orders to the spirit, telling it to finish them off. Momo decides to try to use the power of Grandma Turbo's curse on Okarun again to face the crab, but on hearing this, the old woman refuses to cooperate and tells them not to use her power without her permission. Momo, however, holds firm, while Okarun complains about her weight, saying that he won't be able to make the turn because of her weight. The two end up crashing into a guardrail and are thrown off the track and into the city. Before they hit the ground, Okarun manages to cushion their fall, but just then, the giant crab lands next to them, resuming the chase. As they run, Momo notices that the people around them can't see the giant crab. She hopes that none of her friends witness the scene, as they might think she's gone mad. Meanwhile, Okarun begins to lose strength, but Momo encourages him to give it his all. Okarun explains that continuing at this pace won't be enough to get them out of Shono City, as they still have a long way to go, and if they carry on like this, the crab spirit will catch up with them before they can escape. Momo, determined not to be devoured, guides Okarun to the right, entering a place with narrow corridors. The crab, however, is still on their tail, destroying everything around it. When they reach an area with water, Okarun tells them that they are at a disadvantage because water is the crab's element. However, Momo remembers that it's a hot spring and throws the crab into the hot water, cooking its flesh and tensing the enemy's muscles, slowing it down. Okarun, still slightly frightened, is relieved to see that the crab has finally stopped moving. As for Momo, she comments that the monster looks more appetizing now that it's reddened. Seeing her appetite for the creature that almost killed them, Okarun calls her crazy and suggests that they leave the place and the crab behind as soon as possible. Momo begins to guide them to a street that they can use to get out of the city of Shono. However, in the middle of the road, a crowd comes running towards them, leaving them at a loss to understand what is going on. Just then, Grandma Turbo reappears and says that she won't let them escape so easily. She explains that she spoke to a spirit who was asleep in a nearby cemetery and asked him to summon an army of the dead to chase them. Meanwhile, Momo and Okarun keep trying to flee the scene until, suddenly, Momo stumbles and falls to the ground. Okarun goes back to help her, but Granny Turbo takes advantage of this moment to surround them from all directions. With no way out, Momo asks Okarun to launch a direct attack. He hesitates, realizing that this may not be effective, since the goal is to reach the nearby town. Momo then holds him by the shirt, staring at him seriously, and tells him to give it his all or they'll end up dead right there. Seeing her seriousness, Okarun decides to obey, activating his transformation, while Momo directs him to the right places. They use the giant crab as a lever to launch themselves away from the crowd, returning to the street where they were before. In the middle of the jump, Momo notices that Okarun has returned to his normal appearance, and they both start to fall. Momo manages to cushion the fall, but Okarun feels his body all bruised and admits that he can't continue the fight like this. Momo is also in a lot of pain, but asks him to hurry up and get up as soon as possible. In the midst of the confusion, they realize that they lost sight of Grandma Turbo during the crash, and soon she reappears, complaining that she has been underestimated by them just because of her age. Momo admits that the old woman really is an incredible veteran, capable of intimidating even the youngest, and says that he respects her very much. Momo uses some English words in her speech, which makes Granny Turbo angry, as she believes Momo is trying to trick her with words she doesn't understand. Granny Turbo tells Momo to stop speaking English and suggests that they start running immediately if they don't want to be devoured. Realizing that they are close to leaving the town of Shounen, Grandma Turbo decides to show one last act of compassion by giving them a little time to run. Before resuming the chase, Momo challenges Turbo Granny, saying that she only needs a second to escape. In that second, Momo grabs a train from the Takasak line with her spiritual power, throwing herself aboard a train that reaches 120 kilometers, a speed that surpasses Granny Turbo's maximum speed of just 100 kilometers. However, Granny Turbo patiently waits for the train to slow down on a bend and jumps aboard. With this, she boasts of her intelligence, pointing out that trains don't maintain 121 kilometers all the time, while she is able to run at top speed all the time. While the old woman brags, Momo replies that she just took a ride on her defeat. Meanwhile, Seiko is waiting for Momo and Okarun on the border between the cities, where she welcomes them to the city of Shigo, a territory where Turbo Granny has no power at all, and where Seiko can use all her power. Taking advantage of the fact that she is in favorable territory, Seiko uses all her power against Turbo Granny, completely wiping her out. After defeating the crab, Okarun wakes up, frightened, asking about the giant crab and Turbo Granny who were chasing them. Exhausted, Momo falls to the ground, saying that they've managed to finish them both off. Seiko then takes them back to the tunnel where Turbo Granny used to roam, a place with a heavy aura, known for being where several girls were raped, dismembered, and killed. As a tragic consequence, these young women became evil spirits against their will. Seiko reveals that Granny Turbo had been monitored for a long time, as she always appeared wherever there were spirits of girls who had died unjustly. Although it seemed that Granny Turbo was trying to console these spirits, she was using the dead to attack the living, something that is completely forbidden. This forced the mediums to capture Grandma Turbo and send her to the other world by force. Seiko also makes it clear that the same logic applies to the living. They must also show respect for the dead. When they return home, they serve crab for dinner. However, Okarun loses his appetite because of everything that has happened, and Seiko jokingly calls him a spoiled child and asks him if he really has something between his legs. Okarun, a little indignant, says yes, to which Seiko, standing up, teases him, asking him to prove it, and showing that she wants to see what he has. She starts chasing him around the house, adding to the provocation. At the end of the night, Okarun says goodbye to Momo. She also says goodbye, but realizing that it sounds a bit distant, she calls him again, saying, "See you tomorrow," leaving the hope in the air that they will meet at school the next day. The next day, Okarun is nervous about talking to Momo again and rehearses ways of greeting her, trying to prevent her from realizing that he is too shy for a simple morning greeting. When he arrives at the school gate, he finds her leaning against the wall, seemingly waiting for someone. He thinks for a moment that she might be waiting for him, but then comes to his senses and assumes that it must be someone else. So he decides to just walk past her, as if he hadn't seen her. However, Momo calls out to him and suggests that they walk to the living room together. On the way, she mentions again the day they met those aliens, curious about how they lived and what they ate. When they get to the classroom, Momo says goodbye, and Okarun starts the day being bullied by his classmates. He decides to forgive each one of them, as he now has an amazing friend, Momo. Meanwhile, Momo sits in her corner, more introspective than usual. Her friends begin to comment on her, speculating that something may have happened, perhaps even a problem with her ex-boyfriend, which would have led Momo to break her own cell phone. While her friends talk about her, Momo murmurs quietly, wishing she could talk to Okarun about aliens. On the other side, Okarun also feels like talking to Momo about ghosts and supernatural events. As time goes by, they both have these thoughts in their heads. At break time, the two pass each other without seeing each other. Momo goes to a group of students in Okarun's class and asks for him, but the boys are confused, not knowing who she is talking about, as she calls him Okarun. Momo tries to describe him as the guy with glasses who likes occult things, but they still don't understand and suggest that he must be in the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Okarun tries to ask for Momo in her living room, but his voice comes out so low and timid that no one can hear him properly. So Okarun decides to go out into the corridors and look for Momo in the cafeteria. Meanwhile, Momo goes to the school store, imagining that he would be in a quieter place, away from the noise of the cafeteria. Okarun arrives at the cafeteria, but realizing that Momo isn't there, decides to go to the school store. In the meantime, Momo comes out of the store and passes the cafeteria, resulting in another mismatch between them. After several attempts to find her, Okarun begins to suspect that Momo is deliberately avoiding him. He thinks that perhaps she has realized that he can be boring company, especially since he didn't manage to greet her properly that morning. Meanwhile, Momo, who is literally on a nearby bench, notices that Okarun seemed depressed earlier. She begins to think that perhaps he doesn't feel comfortable talking to her in this proximity and blames herself for not having considered his feelings more carefully. At the same time, Okarun also feels bad about the situation, wondering if he's just a backup friend for Momo, since she always seems to be surrounded by people. Okarun begins to think that Momo might not even consider him a real friend. As the two walk in opposite directions, immersed in their thoughts, they bump into each other and accidentally kiss. Surprised, Momo asks what he's doing there, and Okarun explains that he's been looking for her all this time. Momo, surprised, reveals that she was also trying to find him. Confused, Okarun admits that he thought she was avoiding him, to which Momo replies that she thought the same about him. The situation gets even more awkward when Momo's friends show up, and, upon seeing the kiss, start pointing and commenting. They joke that Momo was acting strange precisely because she was looking forward to meeting Okarun. Feeling embarrassed, Momo and Okarun start arguing and belittling each other, ending with each going in opposite directions, promising not to speak to each other again. As Momo's two friends watch the scene, they comment that, despite everything, the two seem to get on better than they imagined. Later, Okarun reflects and realizes that he got into an argument with Momo on impulse, when in fact, he just wanted to talk to her about ghosts and supernatural phenomena. Determined to apologize, he prepares to try again. Meanwhile, Momo is approached by other girls who want to know more about the mysterious boy they saw her with. One of her friends reveals that he's a nerd with bottle-bottom glasses, causing everyone to laugh. Suddenly, Okarun appears in Momo's room, still reflecting on a revelation he had in the bathroom. He asks to talk to Momo immediately, but she makes it clear that she doesn't want to talk to him anymore and tells him to leave. Okarun insists, explaining that it's important, but Momo's resistance causes the other girls in the room to start making fun of the situation, commenting that they're having a lover's DR. Momo, embarrassed, reaffirms that Okarun is not her boyfriend. Okarun, confused, asks why Momo is avoiding talking to him now. She replies, remembering that he also said he wouldn't talk to her anymore. He explains that he only said it impulsively, because she was the one who said it first, but in reality, he still wants to talk. Momo, however, remains firm and continues to avoid talking to him. Frustrated, Okarun wonders if it's that embarrassing to be his friend, and, disappointed, walks away, believing that Momo is ashamed to have him as a friend. On the way out of school, a girl bumps into Okarun and starts apologizing, touching him in a rather exaggerated way. He becomes visibly tense and tries to walk away, but the girl continues to follow him, saying that he is very kind. Momo, walking down the corridor, sees Okarun with this new friend and finds it strange, since he had said he had no friends apart from her. As soon as the girl walks away, Momo hears her telling a friend that she managed to make the nerd fall in love quickly. She mocks Okarun, saying that he would never have a chance with another pretty girl like her in the future, and that she is doing him a favor by letting him dream. Outraged by these absurdities, Momo uses her power of telekinesis to drop an iron bucket on the girl's head, who collapses instantly. Seeing the situation, Okaran tries to run to help the girl, but Momo holds him back and calls him to go home with her, saying that a person as shallow as that would never understand his true charm. On the way home, Momo apologizes to Okaran, admitting that she acted like an idiot. She explains that she panicked when the rumors about the kiss started spreading among her friends, and that's why she ended up acting as if she was ashamed of him. Okaran forgives her without hesitation, saying that he's not at all bothered by the situation. In fact, he's happy that they've reconciled. Having said that, Okaran changes the subject and asks what really happened to Grandma Turbo, since he fainted in the middle of the fight. Momo explains that they managed to defeat her, said a prayer, and what's more, his curse was broken, with everything returning to normal. However, he quickly corrects him, saying that despite this, his balls are still missing, which makes Momo burst out laughing. They decide to go to Seiko to try and solve the problem. Listening to Okaran, Seiko comments that this is why he didn't notice it was missing before. And he explains that he was so focused on the fact that the stick was back in place that he forgot about the rest. Momo jokes that, given its size, stick is an exaggeration, and that it looks more like a pencil. Okaran, embarrassed, is speechless. To help, Seiko prepares a ritual and gives Okaran a gentle slap on the back. At that moment, Momo notices that his aura changes for a moment, so Seiko instructs Momo to remove the aura as soon as it transforms. When Momo does this, the talisman on the stuffed cat they were wearing starts to burn, and the cat runs out of the house. Momo tries to stop it, but it escapes, insulting everyone while claiming that it will kill anyone who tries to stop it from running away. As soon as Seiko appears, she quickly realizes that the spirit is still Grandma Turbo, which confuses everyone, since Momo and Okaran had already defeated the entity some time ago and sent it to the afterlife. Grandma Turbo, feeling underestimated, says that she would never be defeated by two brats like them. She explains that, while burning under the barrier technique, she took the opportunity to infiltrate Okaran's body again, completely erasing his presence to avoid detection. Her plan was to hide until her spiritual power had fully recovered, allowing her to return to take revenge and finish what she had started. Momo, surprised, recalls that they had already eliminated Grandma Turbo, but the spirit denies defeat, making it clear that the battle isn't over yet. Noticing her confidence, even if it is weakened, Momo wonders if Granny Turbo understands that they are now in control. When Okaran demands back his balls, Granny Turbo, in a twist, decides to use them as hostages. And then, Grandma Turbo, in a masterstroke, reveals that if they try to destroy her, Okaran's balls will disappear forever. She then demands that he take a knife and eliminate Momo and Seiko immediately, promising to return what he has lost if he obeys. This makes Okaran furious, and he suddenly manages to transform, even without any trace of Granny Turbo in his body. After all, only her consciousness has been transferred to a doll, but as Seiko explains, the supernatural powers still reside in the boy. She also claims that only she can restore Granny Turbo's consciousness, leaving the spirit completely in her hands. Momo, in an attempt to resolve the situation peacefully, proposes an exchange. Grandma Turbo returns Okaran's balls, and they return her powers. She even argues, appealing to Grandma Turbo's compassion, mentioning that she knows how much she cared about the girls who suffered and were in that monster. Granny Turbo even seems to be inclined to the idea, but with a mischievous laugh, she admits that she dropped Okaran's balls somewhere and that she can't even remember where. Okaran is dismayed to realize that, despite having recovered some of it, his bag is still empty. Sometime later, Granny Turbo explains that Okaran's balls are stuck to her spiritual energy membrane, and from the glow, she believes they will be easy to find once he can see them. However, despite searching endlessly, Okaran says he still can't see anything, and Momo also complains. joking that it's impossible to find anything as small as his balls. Grandma Turbo then suggests that they may have already disappeared, considering that they can't be found anywhere. She goes on to explain that the male balls have a very strong vital energy, which ends up attracting ghosts and yokais, as many believe they can be reborn by collecting items with this energy. Evil ghosts often attack humans precisely to try to steal this life force. Upon hearing this, Momo begins to suspect that some evil spirit has stolen Okarin's balls, making his recovery practically impossible. While Okarin and Momo try to process this, Grandma Turbo simply ignores the seriousness of the situation without showing much concern. Frustrated, Momo and Okarin start begging Grandma Turbo to help with the search, but realizing that this will lead nowhere, Momo decides to go home and think about what they can do next. When they arrive, they explain the situation to Seiko, who offers to investigate with some friends to see if anyone has a solution. Before leaving, Seiko reminds Okarun that he still has Grandma Turbo's power inside him. Although this power is under control, she warns him that it is still very dangerous, and suggests that he remain calm while they try to solve the problem. The next day, Okarin goes to school as normal. One of the boys, who often teases him, approaches him, asking if he is really seeing Momo. Okarin denies it, but the boy asks him to introduce them, as he wants to try to be friends with her, mentioning how cute she is. Upon hearing this, Okarin thinks that the boy really is right. After all, Momo is very pretty. After these rather impure thoughts, Okarun controls himself and reaffirms that Momo is just a friend. But the student who was talking to him mentions a rumor about Momo, insinuating that she is easy. Okarun angrily grabs the boy by the collar, demanding to know who started this lie about his friend. In the heat of the moment, he begins to lose control, feeling the energy of the transformation increase. Realizing this, he lets go of his colleague and goes back to his desk, trying to calm down with his book of conspiracy theories. Suddenly, Grandma Turbo appears, noticing Okarin's frustration. He quickly takes her to a secluded spot to prevent anyone from seeing her. Granny Turbo tries to persuade him to let her into his body again, promising not to interfere once she regains her full power. But Okarun insists that she must return his balls first. He would never accept a deal with so many risks. The conversation is interrupted by the arrival of Momo, who asks what he's doing there. Remembering what his colleagues said about her being cute, Okarin walks away, embarrassed, unable to look at her. Upset, Momo goes back to her classroom and vents to her friends, mentioning that Okarun is ignoring her for no reason. A friend then tells her that she heard rumors that he had fought with other guys to defend her reputation. Surprised, Momo asks about the rumor and discovers that someone has spread lies about her, and that Okarun has lost control when he hears about it. Meanwhile, the same girl who spread the rumor walks down the corridor, full of herself. Satisfied with her work, she remembers her first encounter with Momo when she saw the demon wings on her. Convinced that Momo is some kind of demon in disguise, the girl feels as if she has been chosen to defeat her. With a touch of superiority, she decides that she is destined to put an end to Momo and begins to plan her next steps. To further reinforce her theory, Era takes one of Okarun's golden balls out of her pocket and claims that the fact that it fell near her is irrefutable proof that she is the chosen one. She remembers the moment she first came into contact with the object, when the ball fell out of nowhere on her head. When she picked it up, she had a vision of the exact moment when Grandma Turbo was exorcised by Seiko, with the sky shining brightly. She decided to keep the object in her pocket, convinced that there was a greater purpose. Back in the present, two of Aira's friends arrive with all the items she had asked for. They question whether they should really be doing something so bizarre. Aira insists that they are, because she believes that she has been chosen to defeat the demon called Momo Ayase. One of her friends, who is only helping out of loyalty, confesses that Aira has been acting strangely lately, and believes that they are about to do something abnormal. Just then, Ira runs towards the window, pointing to a supposed woman in red on the soccer field. Her friends look but see nothing where Ira is pointing. Ira, increasingly obsessed, claims that the figure is a spy sent by Momo to monitor her. Meanwhile, Momo tries to pull Okarin away from the situation, but he ignores her, saying that he needs to keep an eye on Grandma Turbo to make sure she doesn't run away. Momo then questions Granny about what she is doing there at school. After a brief discussion, Okarin intervenes, asking about the ball issue from before. Granny Turbo explains that she's not just wandering around the school, she's actually looking for the jewels of an old family. Momo calls her an idiot, saying that something like that would never be there at school. However, Okarin begins to realize that maybe Grandma isn't so wrong, since her balls could have been found by humans instead of a yokai. Granny Turbo adds that if a human touches the balls, they will awaken spiritual abilities and begin to see ghosts. Ira's vision of seeing bugs everywhere, although not crazy, is explained by the influence of the Okarin ball, which awakens in her a supernatural sensitivity. Furthermore, a human who touches objects with spiritual energy, such as the ball, also becomes visible to ghosts, increasing the risk of attacks. Ira, intrigued, continues to hold Okarin's ball in her hands while she watches a female figure dressed in red approach through the window. She decides to confront Momo personally and calls her for a private conversation. Momo says goodbye to Okarin, leaving him to continue his research, and follows Ira to an abandoned shed, surprised at the location chosen for the conversation. When they arrive, Momo asks Ira directly what she wants, but instead of answering, Ira and her friends pin her to the ground. Using a rosary, Ira tries to exorcise Momo, convinced that she will send her to another world. Her friends hold Momo tightly, but Momo manages to disperse them by spreading her wings. Ira then intensifies her attack, using the Okarin ball, pressing the object against Momo's face. Momo, surprised, immediately recognizes the item and realizes what Ira is holding. Just then, Okarin appears and runs towards them. However, before he can intervene, the ghost in red appears to Ira and introduces herself as her mother, holding her firmly. Seeing this, Okarin transforms and tries to attack the spirit, which interprets his attack as a threat and swallows him to remove him from the situation. Momo tries to rescue him with her powers, but with her hands still trapped, she can't help, and Okarin ends up being swallowed whole. Turning his attention to Ira, the ghost in red says that he has been waiting for this moment for over 10 years. Ira, stunned, is confused, believing the ghost to be an ally of Momo. But the spirit corrects her, calling her a fool and revealing once again that it is her mother. The entity then asks Ira to call it Mommy again, just as she did as a child. Apparently, in her childhood, Ira had lost her way and mistaken the ghost for her mother, holding her hand and calling her Mama. Since then, the spirit has been following the girl. In the midst of the confusion, Momo mocks the ghost, calling it Old Man, and demanding that it return Okarin, pointing out that attacking humans breaks the rules between spirits and mortals. Ira, seeing Momo confront the spirit, asks for help to defeat the creature, completely at a loss to understand the situation. Meanwhile, Grandma Turbo, using Momo's friend's cell phone, searches for information about the ghost. Ira, in her confusion, believes that being chosen from heaven is a consequence of her beauty, and promises to defeat the monster, leaving the spirit touched, although upset at being called a monster. With that, the ghost swallows Ira. Turning to Momo, the spirit accuses her of turning her daughter into a delinquent, and as she approaches to swallow her too, Momo calls Grandma Turbo, but the entity reminds her that she has no powers and that Momo is responsible for this situation. With no alternative, Momo resists while the ghost binds her with its hair, trying to force her to call it Mommy in exchange for forgiveness. Refusing, Momo calls him an idiot once again and ends up swallowed up like the others. At this point, Grandma Turbo decides to act and orders the ghost to free the three of them. Reluctantly, the ghost refuses, but when he discovers that he has swallowed some of Grandma Turbo's hair along with Momo, he realizes that he has made a mistake. The digestion of the hair generates a reaction, and with a fire forming inside the ghost, it has no choice but to release everyone. In the end, everyone escapes, but they end up with torn clothes and practically half naked. Feeling that Era has been taken away from it, the entity starts attacking them again, calling Okarun and Momo pigs and dirty. Okarun, realizing that the monster won't leave them alone, asks what they should do with Aira, since she seems to be the reason for the chase. Momo tells him to keep running, but Okarun complains that the place is full of obstacles, which limits his mobility. At that moment, Momo says she has an idea, but before she can explain, the entity strikes her, throwing her away. Relentlessly, the ghost pursues Okarun again and manages to separate him from Aira. Now alone with the girl, the entity approaches her and declares that, although Aira refuses to call it mommy, it still wants to be by her side. To do this, the entity plans to devour her, becoming part of her blood and flesh, believing that this way they would be together forever. Before the entity can consummate the act, she feels her body paralyze and doesn't understand what is happening. At that moment, Momo appears, sneering at the entity and explaining that she herself had become entangled in its threads when trying to chase Okarun. Realizing her disadvantage, the entity gets even angrier, declaring that she won't be defeated by a cheap trick. Determined to free herself, she begins to break the beams around her, but Momo quickly hooks her legs, preventing her from escaping. With the ghost temporarily immobilized, Momo shouts for Okarun to act and finish her off. However, he hesitates, saying that the only time he defeated the aliens was pure luck. He just acted on the impulse of desperation. Frustrated by his indecision, Momo insists that he just needs to get closer and hit the entity with a kick. As the two argue, the ghost finally breaks free and goes on the attack. Okarun tries to react, but ends up being knocked down and almost faints on the floor. Seeing this, Granny Turbo laments being wasted on someone so incapable of using her power. Desperate, Granny Turbo remembers that one of Okarun's balls is still with Era, and as she is unconscious, this is the best time to get it back. They manage to get the ball, but any relief they felt is quickly destroyed when Granny Turbo reveals something shocking. Era is dead. Upon hearing the revelation, Momo reacts quickly, asking Okarun to check Aira's pulse. When he checks, they both confirm the worst. The girl really is dead. Grandma Turbo coolly explains that humans die when they are devoured by yokais, so she is not at all surprised by the outcome. Even so, Momo decides not to give up and asks if Okarun knows how to do mouth-to-mouth breathing. He admits that he has no idea how to go about it. Without wasting any time, Momo decides to try a heart massage, using her psychic powers to directly stimulate Aira's heart, increasing the chances of bringing her back to life. As she carries out the procedure, Grandma Turbo bluntly comments that if Aira really is dead, the massage will have no effect, as her heart would be nothing more than a piece of meat about to rot. Irritated by the insensitive comments, Momo tells Grandma Turbo to shut up or leave, as her words are only getting in the way. Okarun, for her part, decides to try mouth-to-mouth breathing, even though she has no experience, while Momo remains focused on what she is doing. Suddenly, the spirit of the entity begins to stagger closer, repeating Aira's name several times. Exasperated, Momo gets even angrier, making it clear that she doesn't have time to deal with this problem right now. Realizing the situation, Okarun decides to confront the entity, while Momo continues trying to revive Aira. Upon hearing their plan, the entity interrupts, stating that their efforts are useless and that Aira will not come back to life with these attempts. It reveals that if they really want to save the girl, they will need to transfer their aura to her, explaining that the aura works like a battery for the human body. Without it, the engine can't function. That said, the entity offers to donate its own aura, saying that it's the only way to save Era. Momo, however, is immediately suspicious, believing that the entity is lying and that this is just an attempt to take over Era's body. The ghost fights back, claiming that it is no longer capable of consuming anyone in its current state. Surprisingly, Granny Turbo defends the entity, saying that without the aura transfer, Era will indeed remain dead. Even listening to Grandma Turbo's explanation, Momo remains suspicious and asks how the entity intends to merge her aura with Era's. The entity explains that her aura can be transferred to Era. The entity explains that its aura can connect with Era's as if it were using a communication cable. Although suspicious, Momo decides to give it a vote of confidence, but insists on removing the aura from Era's body herself to prevent the entity from taking full control. As Momo begins the process, she starts to see flashes of the ghost's memories. In the memories, the entity appears playing with her daughter, showing a warm and loving relationship. However, she also lived a secret life to support her family. One day, her house was invaded by men who not only brutally assaulted her, but also kidnapped her daughter. During the confusion, she severely cut her arm on shards of glass, but still desperately tried to follow the kidnapper's car. Exhausted and seriously injured, she collapsed in the middle of the street. While unconscious, the woman had a brief epiphany, glimpsing a beautiful and peaceful place. However, when she woke up, she realized that she had already become a ghost, lost and unable to remember exactly what had happened. What remained was a deep sense of loss, without understanding exactly what she had lost. Back in her memories, little Ira is shown pulling at the dress of the bloodied woman in the street, mistaking her for her mother. However, realizing that the woman was not who she was looking for, Ira walked away, leaving her behind. The entity tried to react, but was disoriented, unable to understand what was happening. Ira's father appears in the scene, scolding her for walking alone in the street. When Ira explains that she mistook a woman for her mother, he replies that it would be impossible for that to be true. Curious, Ira asks where her mother is, and her father explains that she is somewhere far away. He encourages Ira to be strong, saying that her mother will come back one day, and that she must learn to be independent so that her mother can be proud of her when she returns. Moved by her father's words, Ira promises to do her best to become someone her mother would admire. Meanwhile, the entity, still confused and bloody, watches from afar, desperately wondering where her daughter is. Gradually, the pieces begin to fit together, and she finally remembers her traumatic past and the reason for her existence as a ghost. Remembering her daughter, the entity decides that she will do everything in her power to protect her this time, making sure that no one hurts the girl who called her Mommy. At that moment, Ira finally awakens, but Momo falls to the ground, visibly weakened. Okarun, concerned, offers to take care of the entity in case it is doing something against Momo. However, Momo asks him not to interfere. Meanwhile, the entity turns to Era and, with tears in her eyes, apologizes for her actions. Instead of protecting her, as he had promised, he ended up hurting her. Recognizing itself as a true monster, the entity's body begins to disintegrate. Seeing this scene, Momo asks what will happen to the ghost. Granny Turbo explains that, by transferring its entire aura to Ira, the entity will inevitably disappear, ceasing to exist altogether. Momo, intrigued, asks what will be left after that. Grandma Turbo explains that once the entity disappears, it will return to the void, as if it had never existed. Both the living and the dead will forget about it completely. For Granny Turbo, this makes no difference, as she considers that the entity's life probably didn't mean much. Upon hearing this, Momo is moved and, with a heavy heart, declares that such a cruel outcome should not happen to any being, regardless of their history. She asks if there is anything that can be done to ensure that the entity rests in peace. Grandma Turbo replies that the entity's peace depends only on the repentance and acceptance within its heart. As she falls apart, the entity deeply regrets the things she didn't get to do while she was alive, She recalls that she would have liked to have given her daughter better clothes, played with her more, and been a better mother. In a moment of self-criticism, the entity confesses that she believes her daughter would have been happier if she hadn't been born to her. With invisible tears, she apologizes to her daughter for all the time she has disappointed her. At that moment, Aira runs up to the entity and, with a trembling voice, calls her Mama, as she had asked before. Aira says with conviction that she was the happiest person in the world to have her as a mother. The two hug each other in tears, creating an emotional and heart-wrenching moment. Finally, Aira's mother vanishes into thin air, but not without leaving an indelible mark. Aira promises herself that she will never forget her mother, no matter what happens. Man, this story is really heavy and sad. For those who don't quite understand, I'll summarize the drama of this ghost. When she was still alive, she did some strange jobs, you know? You can understand what that means, considering that she woke up alone in a bed with money by her side. It wasn't easy. And, unfortunately, she ended up getting involved with the wrong people. These people broke into her house, stole her daughter, and, in the middle of the confusion, she was seriously injured by a shard of glass that hit a vein. Even so, she desperately ran after the car in which they had taken her daughter, but ended up losing a lot of blood and fainted in the middle of the rain, at the bottom of the well. It was then that she became a ghost, wandering around with no memory and completely destroyed. Then, when she met Aira, who called her Mother, she clung to the girl like a burden, trying to fill the emptiness she felt. And now, at the end of this story, the very girl she haunted ended up saving her life. The life that, ironically, the ghost herself had taken. While they enjoy their meal, Momo decides to use the moment to apologize to Aira for accidentally dropping a bowl on her head a few days ago. Despite her kindness, Momo makes it clear that they have no intention of being friends. She then tells Aira to hurry up and apologize to Okarun for making fun of him behind his back. Aira, however, completely changes the focus of the conversation, and, with a suspicious look on her face, states that she is convinced that Momo is actually a demon. Surprised by the absurd comment, Momo vehemently denies the accusations, explaining that Aira is misinterpreting everything due to a simple misunderstanding. Even so, Aira is not convinced and continues to insist on her theories. She mentions that there are many strange things involving the group, including Seiko, who doesn't seem to be Momo's grandmother, as she is too young and pretty for that. To make matters worse, Seiko enters the conversation, but instead of defending her granddaughter, she decides to play with Aira. Laughing, she says that Momo really does look like a demon sometimes. Aira takes Seiko's words literally, saying that Momo must be the supreme leader of some evil scheme to destroy the world. Momo, incredulous, replies sarcastically, saying that if she had that kind of power, she would have blown Aira's head off a long time ago. The two begin to exchange intense glances as they continue to eat ramen. Aira seizes the moment to accuse Momo of underestimating her own powers. She claims that, contrary to what Momo says, she was chosen to save the world, and that the only criterion for that choice was her divine beauty. After making this absurd statement, Aira simply gets up and walks away, leaving Momo perplexed and talking to herself. Seiko, on the other side, laughs even harder and takes Aira's side, encouraging the taunts. Annoyed to see her own grandmother supporting her rival, Momo curses her, calling her a damned old woman. Aira returns to confront Okarun, this time more seriously. She wants to understand why he protected her so many times, even though she believed he might be a demon. Before he can answer, Momo butts in, saying that Okarun is in no way a demon and that Aira is completely mistaken. Okarun, with his usual calm, says that there was no special reason to protect her. He explains that he always feels the need to help people who are in trouble, simply because that's who he is. These words take Aira by surprise. For a moment, she doesn't know what to say, but she soon realizes that Okarun is actually an incredibly kind person, someone who, despite everything, still has a human heart. After her recent adventures, Aira makes a promise to herself to free Okarun from Momo's supposed control. With this goal in mind, she goes on the run and notices something strange growing inside her. A new feeling comes over her about Okarun, something that leaves her confused since she still believes he might be a demon. Meanwhile, Seiko, Grandma Turbo, and Momo continue their unusual mission to play with Okarun's ball of spiritual energy in order to put it back in the right place. After several clumsy attempts, they finally manage to restore his balance and celebrate their small victory. However, the celebration is interrupted by a major problem. The other ball is still missing. At school, Momo can't hide her concern. She proposes that the group meet at the Net Cafe after school to discuss what to do next. However, Okarun surprises everyone by saying that he won't be able to make it. He mentions that he already plans to give a report during lunch and that he has an appointment after school. During lunch, Momo joins her friends and comments on Okarun's strange behavior. She senses that he's hiding something, but can't figure out what it is. One of her friends, trying to tease her, suggests that there might be another girl involved. Momo, however, dismisses this idea out of hand, saying that Okarun is the last person she would suspect of this. Although she denies it, something reminds her of Aira and the way she looked at Okarun when they said goodbye. The thought bothers her more than she'd like to admit. Trying to distract herself, Momo decides to go out and buy some juice, but the thought of Okarun hiding something keeps hammering at the back of her mind. Determined to resolve her suspicions, Momo considers going to Okarun's class to confront him, but changes her mind, deciding not to disturb his report. As she returns to her classroom, she comes across an unexpected scene. Okarun is standing over Aira, apparently at a suspicious moment. But what really happened? Shortly before Momo appeared, Okarun was training alone, trying to improve his physical strength to face future enemies. During his training, he was interrupted by Aira, who appeared with a serious expression on her face. As usual, she began to insist on her theory that he was a demon, but this time something was different. Despite her suspicions, Aira decides to open up and confess her feelings for Okarun. Without warning, she approaches him and tries to kiss him, leaving Okarun completely bewildered. He pushes her away, clearly embarrassed and not knowing how to react to the unexpected approach. Surprised by the rejection, Aira explains that, according to her father's books, it is normal for people to kiss when a declaration of love is made. Furthermore, she firmly states that it is a man's responsibility to accept a woman's feelings when she reveals them. Aira's completely random speech leaves Okarun even more confused, but he maintains his firm stance and reprimands her. He says that she, being such a popular girl, shouldn't act so impulsively. In his opinion, there are more important things she should be worrying about. Aira doesn't let it go. After being scolded by Okarun, she replies with conviction that he is wrong to try to link popularity with romance. For her, one has nothing to do with the other. While they're arguing and pushing each other, their legs end up tangling and Okarun falls on top of Aira. What makes the situation even worse is the exact moment when Momo appears and sees everything. To make matters worse, Aira pouts, as if expecting a kiss. Momo, not wanting to hear any explanations, turns away, leaving Okarun talking to himself. Feeling betrayed, she thinks that instead of working on the report, he was having fun with Aira. Okarun tries to follow Momo to clear up the misunderstanding, but she shouts at him and storms off to biology class. There, while studying the incredible strength of a boxer lobster, Momo tries to divert her thoughts, but remains visibly shaken. Across the room, her friends see her depressed expression and start whispering. Momo, frustrated, starts talking to one of the lobsters in the aquarium, saying that she would like to punch something once in a while. Her friends, seeing this, deduce that Momo must have been possessed by a spirit, as they can think of no other explanation for her attitude. Meanwhile, Okarun reflects on the situation. He realizes that apologizing may not be enough and assumes that the whole mess was caused by his lack of communication. Deep down, he wanted to appear stronger and impress Momo, planning to surprise her with his progress in training. But now he decides to follow an even more intense routine without making excuses to really become worthy of her attention. Suddenly, something strange happens. While Okarin is training, he notices that all the people around him disappear. The floor of the room, once dry, is now completely soaked. Tension rises when a high-pitched scream echoes through the school, drawing his attention. Following the sound, he finds Era, who is also confused about what is going on. Okarin takes the opportunity to ask about the whereabouts of the people who were in the school moments before. Like him, Era has no idea what's going on. She mentions that everything around them has become very quiet, almost as if they were isolated. Without wasting any time, Era, as usual, blames Momo, believing that she used her supposed demonic powers to create this strange situation. Okarin, hearing Momo's name, realizes that she too has disappeared. He runs around the school calling for her, but gets no answer. As he searches desperately, he notices something familiar in the feeling that surrounds him. Something inside him recognizes this strange environment, but he still can't put his finger on what exactly is going on. Meanwhile, Momo also finds herself in a bizarre situation. Without understanding what is going on, she begins to worry about Okarin. However, before she can act, the memory of the previous incident between the two of them invades her mind, and she hesitates. However, Momo senses a strange presence approaching. Suddenly, she spots something that looks like a dinosaur, but with strange features, more like a giant snake. As she tries to process what she is seeing, the monster creates a ripple in the water around her. Momo realizes the danger when the creature detects his presence and fires a green laser beam, causing a massive explosion that destroys much of the place. Elsewhere, Okarin hears the bang caused by the monster's attack. He suspects it's an explosion and prepares to investigate. Era, ever suspicious, hints that both he and Momo may be plotting something against her. Irritated, Okarin makes it clear that he has no idea what is going on. Although he doesn't fully understand what is going on, Okarin mentions that he has experienced something similar in the past. He recalls an event in which the sky suddenly darkened, leaving him and Momo surrounded by mysterious forces. Curious, Era asks what they did to resolve the situation. Okarin reveals that they had to defeat the alien responsible for creating the chaos. Era, confused, is shocked to hear about aliens, as she had no idea that such beings really existed. Okarin explains that, in addition to the yokais, the aliens are even more powerful enemies. When Era asks why they attack, he admits that he doesn't know for sure. However, he shares that the aliens they faced earlier were harvesting human reproductive organs, which only makes the situation even more disconcerting. While talking, the two are interrupted by a speeding monster that comes out of nowhere. The bizarre creature, for some reason, keeps repeating Chiquitita in Spanish, while attacking with frightening speed. Sensing the impending attack, Okarin quickly transforms to protect Ira. With quick, precise movements, he saves her from the attack. Immediately afterwards, he asks her to flee so as not to hinder his fight against the monster. As he asks her to move away, Okarin refers to Ira as Ira-chan, an affectionate nickname that makes her blush visibly. Ira, still surprised by the gesture and the gentle tone, tries to hide her reaction, and she then tells him not to call her that since they haven't even kissed. Meanwhile, Okarin is surprised by the same aliens who previously tried to capture Momo. They attack him, throwing him violently to the ground, clearly surprised to find him again. Meanwhile, Ira, determined to help him, pulls out a crucifix and points it in the direction of the aliens, shouting at them to get away from Okarin. She threatens to fight them if they don't back down. However, Okarin, knowing the devastating power of these aliens, desperately asks Ira to flee. He explains that the monster's main objective is to capture women because of their strange interest in reproductive organs. Before Ira can react, the aliens unleash a powerful gust of wind, blowing her away. With Era out of the way, the aliens turn to Okarin and declare that they have come to capture his banana. Okarin, indignant, shouts, "Why does everyone want my Malachi so much?" The aliens then reveal the reason. They believe that Okarun's banana possesses an extremely advanced technology that surpasses anything ever developed by them. This ability is actually the power of Grandma Turbo, which they mistakenly believe is inherent in the boy. For the aliens, this ability is incredibly valuable and can be used in experiments that include replicating Okarun's abilities, which they consider to be extremely powerful. Okarun tries to explain that the power he possesses is not natural, but the result of a curse. He claims that these abilities are not part of his biology and that they are not as useful as the aliens imagine. However, the aliens ignore his explanation and proceed to cut up his banana. But in the midst of this chaos, Ira transforms into a supernatural dancer and begins to beat up the monsters, delivering precise and devastating blows while proudly reaffirming, "I am the chosen one." And apparently, every yokai dons an incredibly insane mask, reflecting the power and intensity of their awakening. Upon realizing that Era also has powers, one of the aliens understands why she is able to enter their space, so they decide to take advantage of the situation to capture her banana as well. Meanwhile, Okarun decides to go away to put something on, since his clothes were completely destroyed in the last attack. Ira, however, sets out to face the threats alone, while Okarun stays out of the fight. He starts looking around, but can't find any clothes to put on, which sends him into a panic. Just then, Chiki hits Okarun with a direct blow, knocking him away. Ira then goes back to fighting the aliens, but his head sinks into the ceiling. Ira feels as if she's being crushed by something, and the alien reveals that he's able to use his powers even without having to talk about photogrammetry. He says he couldn't pass up the fact that she had let her guard down. Ira replies that she doesn't care and asks him to let her go. Chiki, however, says that because she has such good moves, they'll capture her banana too. Upon hearing this, Ira replies, "I'll be chosen divine, and I won't lose to anyone." Chiki strikes Ira again, destroying the wall behind her. Chiki then agrees that Ira is indeed chosen, but not in the way she believes. He reveals that she was chosen for the evolution of the aliens. With that, they begin to plan the removal of her banana. Meanwhile, Okarun, still unclothed, decides that he needs to do something for his friend, because for him, there are more important things than clothes. He transforms in front of everyone, preparing to fight. But soon, the aliens start pressing him against the ground, undoing his transformation. One of the aliens explains that their power is possible thanks to the three of them combining psychokinesis. This power is called the Incredible Zone and is responsible for nullifying the transformation of any being within their area. Although useful against their enemies, this power has a flaw. They cannot attack Era or Okarun while they have this power active. However, they get around this weakness by placing another monster in the area and ordering it to beat Okarun to death. However, during the fight, Okarun manages to regain his strength and, with a sharp blow, sends the enemy away, making him cross the Incredible Zone. One of the aliens realizes that someone is repelling his psychic powers and discovers that it is Momo, who is not at all happy to see Okarun at Ira's side. Okarun, for his part, tries to ease the tension by saying that he misses her, but Momo calls him a pervert, pointing out that he is still without clothes. Meanwhile, the aliens prepare for combat, waking up one of their own who is out of action. He is instructed to focus on the fight, and as soon as he gets up, he begins to deliver several blows to Okarun. He is ordered to kill them, but in the middle of the exchange of attacks, Momo intervenes, repelling the psychic powers. However, one of the aliens still manages to move and starts advancing towards them. Okarun and Ira then attack with their psychic powers, but the alien manages to hit Ira with a hook, causing her head to sink into the ceiling, something similar to what it did to Chiki. Ira, with her head trapped, comments that she can't see the alien's attacks, which makes the fight much more difficult. The monster tries to finish Ira off with a surprise blow, but Okarun realizes intention and manages to save Ira in time. Momo, seeing this, is surprised. She didn't expect Okarun to be able to dodge the alien's attacks. At that moment, Okarun and Ira attack again, targeting the enemy's weak points. However, seeing how close they are, Momo feels a surge of jealousy and asks them to stop, warning that if they carry on like this, they will all explode together. The tension between the three increases, and Momo loses control of her magic. Aira, irritated, reprimands Momo and reminds her that she is responsible for containing the alien's psychic powers, and that she cannot be distracted. As they argue, the surrounding corridor begins to glow, and a wave of green water floods the place, submerging everything. Momo manages to reach the surface, and as she touches the wall, she realizes that both the ceiling and the walls have been turned into water. She looks around, worried about what is happening. To complicate matters even more, Okarin recognizes the creature in front of him as Nessie, who starts sliding down the ceiling of the corridor in a threatening manner. The atmosphere becomes tense, and Momo, with her usual seriousness, suggests that the only option now is to run away. However, Aira doesn't agree at all. She challenges Momo, questioning her right to lead the group, pointing out that no one elected her leader. For Aira, the real leader is Okarin, and she makes that clear. Meanwhile, the aliens start arguing among themselves. Serpo Nessie, who failed to control Momo, receives a serious punishment. He will have 60% of his salary cut off for his failure. This punishment, of course, is not well received, and Nessie, showing his power, decides to resolve the situation in a very direct way. With a precise blow, he breaks one of the aliens in half, causing the others to collide. When Okarin and Momo see what has happened, they waste no time. They start swimming at full speed, leaving Aira behind, who is still trying to understand the situation. Suddenly, the sharp sound of a blow cutting through the water interrupts their escape, and a giant shrimp appears underwater, ready to attack anyone who gets close. Okarin, his heart pounding, explains that sea shrimps are even more powerful underwater, and, as if that wasn't enough, he comments that the shrimp's blow is 10 times stronger when it's submerged. The danger is real, and despite the shrimp's advantage, it also needs to come up for air, which creates an opportunity for Okarin and Momo. To try to escape more quickly, Okarin decides to use his turbo granite, his turbocharged legs, but soon realizes that this transformation doesn't work for swimming since he's sinking. Laughing at his situation, he goes back to swimming on his own legs, feeling the weight of the pressure. In the midst of this rush, Okarin feels frustrated. Although they need to save themselves, he knows they have to find a way to rescue Aira, who has been underwater for longer. He asks Momo about her psychic powers, but she explains that she can only use them when she is close to the enemy. As the shrimp won't allow her to get close, Momo is left with no options. Okarin, determined, offers to get the shrimp's attention, giving Momo an opening to use her powers. Momo initially rejects the idea, fearing that Okarin will end up like Aira, succumbing to the creature's attack. He insists, however, explaining that he just wants to be useful and asks her to stop screaming. Momo, with her usual coldness, replies that his idea won't help. He would only be complicating things further, and the best option now is to get away as quickly as possible. As for Aira, Momo doesn't miss an opportunity to accuse her. She claims that it's her fault for getting dirty with Okarin, but Okarin, uncomfortable, tries to defend the situation, making it clear that they've done nothing wrong. Momo, however, continues to berate them, recalling the incident in which Okarin knocked her to the ground and stood over her. Upon hearing Momo's words, Okarin quickly deduces that she is jealous, and tries to apologize, saying that it was no big deal. Momo, trying to cover it up, tries to downplay the situation, saying that she doesn't mind what they do together, but Okarin doesn't seem convinced. He asks Momo to let him explain further because he doesn't care what other people think, but he doesn't want her to misinterpret things. Before the conversation can continue, however, the shrimp goes on the attack again, interrupting the discussion. It goes after the group again, and Momo, with a quick idea, jumps on Okarin, pressing her body against his to increase her escape speed. With this, they manage to lose the shrimp and save Aira at the same time. When the situation calms down, Momo realizes that Aira has swallowed a large amount of water and quickly uses her psychic powers to remove the water from her lungs, bringing her back to life. When Aira wakes up, Momo instructs her to take off her clothes as the friction of the water is hindering her movements. However, Aira refuses, saying that she will only undress when she is married. Aira's attitude irritates Momo a little, but she tries not to be bothered by the situation. Meanwhile, the aliens, who are still searching for a solution, are beginning to realize that, despite their strength, everyone has a weakness that favors the enemy. One of the aliens, for example, attacks anything that moves in front of it, which makes its attacks inaccurate. The shrimp, on the other hand, always needs to return to the surface to breathe, which gives the heroes a chance to attack it. Seeing the lack of coordination between them, the alien leader suggests that they use a transmission cable to merge into a single being, an attempt to increase their chances of success. Meanwhile, Momo finally manages to convince Era to take off her clothes, although Era says that Okarun will now have to take responsibility for seeing her like that. The two climb on Okarun, and the trio head towards the shrimp, which starts attacking them as soon as it sees them approaching. After an intense battle, they finally manage to escape from the imminent danger. Okarun, on the lookout, notices something crucial. The shrimp is using a device on its neck to store and fire water in its attacks. He deduces that if they manage to destroy this device, the shrimp's attacks will cease. With this in mind, they try to get closer to the enemy to put their plan into practice. When they get close, the shrimp, realizing their intention, says that they are still impressive in hand-to-hand combat underwater. Before they can act, the three of them are hurled away with devastating force, being thrown backwards by the intensity of the enemy's attacks. Suddenly, Momo is dragged away from her friends, as the aliens identify her as the most dangerous enemy and decide to give her priority. Although they could just wait for Momo to drown, they choose to try to finish her off quickly. They argue among themselves about the best way to kill her, until one of the aliens tries to attack her. However, Momo manages to defend herself easily, saying that he made a big mistake by merging with the shrimp, as his punches are only effective underwater, which is not the case on dry land. With this flaw, the alien, by throwing a punch with all his strength, ends up self-sabotaging. The punch, with all its concentrated energy, results in its own implosion, cooking its arms until they explode. However, the alien still remembers that despite his weakness, he can breathe underwater, while Momo, out of the water, is at the mercy of death. At this point, Aira, even underwater, uses her hair as an improvised weapon. She traps her enemy with it, creating a path between the strands, allowing Okarun to reach Momo. Okarun quickly rescues her, and, with one swift movement, pierces the alien with a deadly blow, ending the threat. After everything calms down, Momo and Okarun wake up on top of each other in exactly the same position as they were in the other dimension. Okarun, upon touching the ground, realizes that it is solid again and, relieved, is sure that the nightmare is finally over. However, they are both visibly frightened and confused by what has just happened. Suddenly, the school returns to normal, when other students appear in the corridor and see Okarun and Momo on the floor. In that compromising situation, and with practically no clothes on, everyone starts jumping to conclusions. They begin to speculate that the little couple might be involved in some kind of snoo-snoo situation, or something. Only then do the two realize the situation they're in, and, embarrassed, quickly get up and start running. Aira, who is also present, joins them, making the scene even more chaotic. All the other students watch, not really understanding what's going on, as the three of them flee the scene. Soon after, when they find themselves in the school nurse's office, the scene feels like it was ripped straight from a manga that really shouldn't be getting published. While they're there, the nurse starts asking if they've been dealing with bullying. They quickly deny it, saying everything's fine. But the nurse, with that suspicious look in her eye, keeps pushing. She makes it clear that she has zero tolerance for bullying, so if something's going on, they can talk to her without any fear. In the middle of this conversation, what happens? They're interrupted by a school staff member who barges in without even knocking. The nurse, visibly annoyed, starts scolding him, reminding him that she's told him multiple times not to just barge into her office like that. And then, out of nowhere, she starts disciplining him with a whip. While she's busy handling this, she quickly turns to the students and announces that she'll be stepping out for a while. Aira, witnessing all of this, starts feeling uncomfortable with the situation. It all feels kind of off, and of course, Momo can't take it anymore. Momo begins to get irritated that the aliens keep following them around. That's when Okarun finally explains. the aliens aren't actually after Momo and the others. They want to steal the Turbo Granny's power at any cost. Momo, curious, asks Eira when she first got this yokai power. Eira responds that the power awakened in her during a fight, but she's always been a chosen warrior, even before her yokai powers awakened. Now that she has this ability, Okarun believes that she'll be the aliens' next target. Eira is flattered but tries to hide her surprise, although it's clear that she's a little uncomfortable with Okarun's concern for her. But as always, Okarun acts like he doesn't care and continues talking to Momo about the aliens, saying that as long as they have yokai powers, the aliens will never stop chasing them. Momo then asks a thought-provoking question. If the aliens want the yokai powers, why don't they just go directly after the yokai themselves? Okarun, thinking for a moment, realizes that Momo's right. He then explains that the reason the aliens haven't invaded Earth, even though they have the power to do so, is because the planet is filled with yokai. For Okarun, Earth is protected by these powerful beings, who keep the aliens at bay. Okarun further says that the aliens are targeting humans because they're weaker than yokai. By absorbing human energy, they plan to evolve and take the next step, exterminating the yokai. So, Okarun starts freaking out more than Batman and begins yelling that they need to hurry up and find his ball. Momo, completely lost, doesn't understand anything he's saying because Okarun explained everything in a super confusing way. But, as always, she sees herself as the one responsible for saving the world from this evil he mentioned. After that, she gets all embarrassed and starts talking again about that moment when the other students saw her without clothes, and the panic hits her again. Then, Momo starts to realize that, in the end, telling the whole story won't help. No one's going to believe her anyway. Thinking it through, Eira decides to get herself out of this situation and throws the blame on Momo, saying that Momo was the one who undressed her. Momo, of course, gets furious and totally rejects this version of the story, but Eira insists that's really what happened, reminding her that at one point, she actually asked the girl to undress. In the middle of this back and forth, some girls show up to pick up Eira, and Okarun, not wasting any time, starts pressuring Momo to think of a quick excuse. He warns her that if she doesn't, Eira will paint her as the villain of the whole story to everyone. Momo, on the other hand, doesn't care about the situation, and instead asks what went down between Okarun and Eira that day when they were practically on top of each other. Okarun, a little embarrassed, reveals that Eira came on to him out of nowhere, trying to kiss him. Because of that, a fight broke out between them, and they both ended up on the floor. Okarun then explains that when Momo arrived, she found them in a somewhat suspicious position, but honestly, nothing happened. Even with this explanation, Momo still asks what he was doing there at that moment. Then, Okarun, totally embarrassed, drops the truth. He was doing push-ups because he wanted to get stronger. Momo, still not quite getting it, asks why he was training in secret. And then, out of nowhere, Okarun says he was trying to get stronger without her knowing, just so he could surprise her when she saw him all muscular. When Momo hears this, she starts laughing, because she didn't know Okarun had this soft side. Okarun, all flustered, says he just wanted to be cool for her, and Momo, seizing the moment, asks to see his embarrassed face. Okarun tries to look away and leave, but the atmosphere between them stays a bit tense, yet funny. Just then, two of Momo's friends show up, and with that mischievous smile, they say they've already heard about the scene that went down between her and Okarun. They tease, saying the two of them hug, like Adam and Eve. So the two of them start getting closer, pushing even more, because they want to know what really happened. Momo doesn't waste any time and decides to defend herself, saying that even if she tried to explain, the girls would never understand. But just with that statement, Momo's friend drops. I figured out the mystery. So, that's it. You guys are in a love triangle, right? She even recalls how Eira was also in that vibe, just like Momo and Okarun, and concludes her investigation with that. Meanwhile, she starts remembering the time when Momo was talking to the mantis of the sea and deduces that Momo was just trying to learn how to punch like the mantis, to knock out Eira more easily. As for Eira, when asked what happened, she decides to stay silent to avoid tarnishing the good girl image she has among her friends. That's when one of the students asks if Momo had something to do with it, since she'd been messing around with Aira for a while. Hearing this makes everyone start spreading more rumors about Momo, saying that she hooks up with anyone. So the group decides to take action to make sure Momo doesn't get away with it. Aira, seeing the total injustice of the situation, can't take it anymore and decides to tell the truth about the rumors. She admits that it was her who spread the lies, saying Momo hooks up with anyone, and asks everyone to stop talking bad about her. But right after admitting it, Aira deeply regrets it. By admitting she spread false rumors, she completely destroys her own popularity. Momo, seeing her friend in that state, goes up to her to understand what happened. Just then, Tiki-Tita shows up, still wanting to fight, but collapses to the ground because he's still weak from the previous fight. He wakes up at Momo's house with his wounds being treated and initially goes to attack again. But when he sees they've been taking care of him, Tiki-Tita starts crying emotionally and says that no one has ever been so kind to him before. He promises that he'll never hurt anyone again. After they eat together, Tiki-Tita reveals that his son is sick and the treatment costs a fortune. While explaining his story, he says some words no one understands, which makes communication difficult. But still, he explains that where he's from, they don't pay well, so he has to go after foreign coins to gather the money needed. And, to make matters worse, Tiki-Tita doesn't have enough strength to do the work his country requires of him, so he ends up having to get involved in dangerous and illegal jobs. And, because he's weak and can't make money, his wife ended up dying from the same disease that his son is now suffering from. He reflects on the harm he's caused to humans and starts crying, saying he feels like a complete failure. Seeing Tiki-Tita in that state, Okarin asks how they can help. He even suggests giving his Bigolino to the alien as a way to cure Tiki-Tita's son. Momo immediately contests, saying giving his Bigolino is asking too much. Okarun reminds them they could try to recover it later, but Momo says they don't even know where they would find the so-called Bigolino. Moreover, the blood treatment that Tiki-Tita's son needs is something that has to be done regularly, so even if they help once, it won't matter in the long run. Momo says the only way for Tiki-Tita to save his son is to find a decent job. Tiki-Tita, on the other hand, says that even though he wants to work, he can't, so he's willing to accept help in any way possible. As for Aira, she offers to recover Okarin's ball later. Momo, feeling jealous, says in a slightly lower voice that she doesn't care. Aira, however, responds that Momo should support Okarin when he tries to help someone else, because that's what being a partner means. Hearing this, Momo loses her patience and tells Aira to stop pretending to be Okarun's partner. Tiki-Tita, even knowing Okarin wants to help, agrees with Momo, saying she's right in this situation. Although Tiki-Tita feels grateful for all the support, he believes they've done enough for him and decides to move on alone to try and fix his life. He thanks everyone for their help, but before leaving, Seiko notices something strange. Tiki-Tita's blood is that white liquid that drips from him, so Seiko decides to do a test and gives him milk to drink. After he finishes drinking, Tiki-Tita realizes that the liquid is identical to their blood. Seiko then reveals that with this, he could save his son's life. Tiki-Tita says the liquid is still a little thin, but Seiko responds that it's like that because it makes it easier for humans to consume. And with that, Seiko decides to lend a hand to Tiki-Tita, calling up a farmer friend to donate a cow to him. After everything is arranged, they say their goodbyes to him, who is already in his spaceship parked in the backyard. Yes, a huge spaceship right in the middle of the garden. Before taking off, Tiki-Tita thanks them from the bottom of his heart for their generosity, promising he will never forget what they've done for him. At that moment, Momo turns to her grandmother and says, "Now you believe in aliens, huh? You just saw a guy abduct a cow with a spaceship right in front of you." But Seiko, as stubborn as always, insists that Tiki-Tita is nothing but a kappa. So Okarin, trying to help, mentions a theory that kappas could actually be aliens. It seems like the conversation won't convince Seiko, but at least they gave it a shot. When they get back home, Momo decides to go for it, kneeling and begging Seiko to buy new uniforms for them. Seiko, however, replies that she'll only buy uniforms for dear Okarin and Aira, because she doesn't like how Momo keeps trying to exploit her money. But after thinking for a moment, Seiko says she'll buy a uniform for Momo too, as long as she follows her rules. With no choice, Momo agrees. Suddenly, the doorbell rings, and Seiko tells Momo to answer it without interrupting her invitation, which is now part of the deal. When she opens the door, Momo is face to face with Gigi, a guy who surprises her and, of course, makes her blush a little. Intrigued, Okarun asks who the guy is. That's when Seiko explains, this is Momo's childhood friend, and also her first love. As for Okarun, he observes that Gigi seems like a super stylish guy, and based on how he's dressed, imagines the boy must be an athlete. However, after praising Gigi in every possible way, Okarun feels disappointed, realizing he had said too much. After all, Gigi turns out to be nothing but a clown. The boy begins to mimic Momo in a ridiculous manner, making her want to kill him right then and there. Despite her disapproval, Seiko invites Gigi inside, leaving Momo even more confused. She asks what's going on, and Seiko reveals that Gigi will be living with them starting that day. Momo, in disbelief, starts yelling and begging for this not to happen. However, Gigi interprets Momo's explosive reaction as if she's genuinely happy about his presence. He even jokes, suggesting that Momo must have been in need of a new demon in her home, which is why she called for him. Ira's paranoia kicks up a notch as she starts believing that Momo is assembling a team of allies for something big, whatever that may be. Ira even imagines that Momo is preparing for Ragnarok or some kind of final war, a theory that, to her, is becoming increasingly plausible. Okarun, fed up with such nonsense, tries to step in, saying that none of this is actually happening. However, Aira, fully consumed by her own conspiracy theory, begins arguing with Momo, claiming that her evil plan is now obvious to everyone. She even points out that although they had been allies against the aliens, that alliance was merely temporary. After all, Momo is now her newest enemy. In short, everything has taken a dramatic turn. Amid the chaos, Aira decides that she too will gather her own allies to fight against Ragnarok, which doesn't even exist. With that, she runs off, leaving Momo even more frustrated. The feeling of dealing with one problem after another doesn't help. Okarun, witnessing the entire mess, decides to head home as well. On his way out, Momo makes a hand gesture, signaling that they'll see each other the next day. Okarun, confused, is left wondering, but Momo swallows her pride and, with all the confidence in the world, says, "See you tomorrow." She then asks him to do the same, as she had already taken the trouble of starting all of this. Okarun is completely flustered, but, in the end, responds in a way that leaves them both embarrassed. After their goodbye, Momo returns home, still filled with questions. Once again, she asks her grandmother, Seiko, why Gigi is living with them. Seiko, in her straightforward way, explains that Gigi's parents were hospitalized and they needed to help him. But Momo, still skeptical, questions why he had to live specifically with, as he could easily stay at a relative's house. Hearing this, Seiko calls her ugly and gives her a lesson on how people need to help one another. Meanwhile, Gigi, on the other side of the room, showers Seiko with compliments, thanking her for her hospitality. Observing this, Momo quickly deduces that her grandmother is simply emotional from all the flattery and that Gigi is just sucking up to get what he wants. Seiko, however, tries to refute this, claiming that no one could ever fool her with cheap flattery. But ironically, Gigi compliments her again, and she can't help but smile in satisfaction. After dinner, Momo decides to confront Gigi, telling him there's something strange about his story with Seiko. Gigi takes the opportunity to apologize for something that happened in the past. He admits that, back in elementary school, he used to tease Momo for believing in ghosts. He then reveals that nowadays he can see ghosts himself. Surprised, Momo suddenly asks if he's ever seen a golden orb around. Confused, Gigi interprets the question as some kind of inappropriate joke. Momo, realizing the misunderstanding, tries to play it off and asks him to forget what she just said. Trying to change the subject, Gigi talks about the large house he moved into around the same time he and Momo went to different schools. Although he usually enjoys places surrounded by greenery, he began to feel uncomfortable in that house. At first, he thought it was just his imagination, but as time passed, every piece of furniture, and every room started to feel strange. When he finally decided to tell his parents about what he was feeling, they didn't take him seriously. They said it was just his imagination. Even though he tried to convince himself it was just paranoia, everything changed when he saw his first ghost in the house. From that moment on, he started seeing them constantly. As if that wasn't enough, his parents' health deteriorated inexplicably. This led them to seek help from mediums to perform exorcisms in the house. However, out of the 5 mediums who offered to solve his parents' case, 3 of them simply stopped functioning indefinitely. In other words, they died. As for the other 2, even though they were veterans, they couldn't handle the situation. That's when Gigi was given one final recommendation: seek out Seiko, the only one with the power necessary to help him. After explaining the whole situation, Gigi apologizes to Momo for involving her family in such a serious matter. Momo, trying to ease the tension, tells him to stop apologizing and assures him that her grandmother will take care of the evil spirit tormenting his parents. But upon hearing this, Seiko interrupts, saying that she won't be able to handle the case herself since her powers only work within the city where she lives. With a mischievous look, she announces that the task will be handed over to Momo. Seiko also suggests that Gigi's problem might be related to the mysterious golden orb, as something similar happened with Ira, who started seeing ghosts after interacting with Okarun's orb. To convince Momo to accept the mission, Seiko makes an irresistible offer. She promises to buy Momo as many school uniforms as she wants if she takes on the challenge of going to Gigi's haunted house. The next day, at the new school, Gigi makes an extremely flashy entrance, introducing himself with so much energy that he leaves all the students stunned. He seizes the moment to crack a joke about his parents being hospitalized, telling a girl in the class that if she doesn't give him her number, he might just die of sadness. The whole class is left speechless, while the teacher, trying to restore order, tells Gigi to sit next to Momo, as, according to her, the two are practically family. As soon as Gigi sits down, Momo's friends start asking questions about him. Trying to minimize the commotion, Momo responds that he's just a childhood friend from elementary school, but Gigi, always irreverent, decides to spice up the conversation. With a mischievous grin, he announces to the girls that he and Momo are living together. The entire class is left speechless, and Momo, irritated, tells him to stop immediately before strange rumors start spreading. However, hearing her request only encourages Gigi to escalate further. Without missing a beat, he declares that they are the couple whose parents approve of them dating. The comment leaves the room in shock, and Momo ready to explode. Muko, the only sensible person in the group, and that includes Momo herself, steps in front of Gigi to put an end to the joke. With a serious tone, she says, "Momo already has Okaran, so there's no room for this kind of nonsense." Speaking of Okaran, he feels completely uncomfortable with Gigi's sudden arrival. After all, he believes Momo might still like Gigi, considering he was her first. To make matters worse, he recalls Gigi calling Momo by her first name and saying she's adorable, which only deepens his insecurity. Okaran starts imagining what it would be like if the two actually started dating. In his paranoid mind, Momo would completely lose interest in him, start caring only about Gigi's hobbies, and leave behind the supernatural, the one passion they share. This train of thought isolates him even more, and during the school break, lost in his negative thoughts, Okaran lays his head on the desk, visibly frustrated. Realizing he's falling behind, he decides to resume his training. However, his plans are interrupted when Momo appears, telling him she's going to keep a close eye on him to ensure he doesn't get into any more trouble. Taking the opportunity, Okaran tries to clarify that the incident with Ira wasn't his fault, as she was the one who tried to kiss him by force. Still skeptical, Momo decides to change the subject. In an unexpectedly sweet tone, she offers to feed him since his hands are occupied with training. Okarun, taken aback, almost chokes at the suggestion. In the middle of this awkward moment, Gigi shows up, interrupting their conversation with a yogurt he brought for Momo. Okarun watches the two of them talking so casually and notices Momo's cheerful smile. This makes him decide to stop interacting with her for now. He resolves, at least in his head, to give Momo some space. But, as always, that determination doesn't last long. Suddenly, something unexpected happens. Okaran spots an anatomical doll running straight toward him. The mysterious doll charges forward and almost collides with Momo, who desperately tries to stop it. Before anything worse can happen, Gigi pulls Momo out of the way, and the doll leaps over him, revealing its golden orb. Seeing this, Momo activates her powers and tries to stop the doll, but she ends up being dragged along through a chaotic hallway. Realizing he needs to act quickly to save Momo, Okarun tries to run after her, but soon realizes that his normal speed won't cut it. Without a second thought, he activates the powers he inherited from Turbo Granny and increases his speed dramatically. Finally, he manages to come face to face with the mysterious anatomical doll, the new holder of one of his golden orbs. The doll, with a defiant stance, vows that it won't stop for anything. Amid the chaos, Okaran manages to rescue Momo and Gigi, who were being dragged along. However, the confusion only grows when Gigi, completely freaked out, starts to believe that Okarun is some kind of monster. Momo, exasperated, explains the situation to him, calming Gigi down a little. Adrenaline pumping, Momo intensifies her spiritual energy and charges at the doll, calling it a miserable scoundrel while trying to hold it back. Okarun and Gigi quickly join her in an attempt to pull the doll away, but it clings to a pole with all its strength, declaring that it won't give up so easily. In an unexpected move, the doll completely disassembles its body, scattering its parts across a different area and escaping from Momo and the others. Determined, the trio keeps following the doll into a restricted zone. There, they find a strange energy creature lying on the ground. Momo explains that by disassembling its body, the doll made its parts vulnerable, making it easier for her to locate its heart. She managed to grab it, preventing it from continuing to run. With a confident look, Momo punches the doll's heart, finding it by following the sound of its scream. Out of patience for further delays, she demands that the doll return Okarun's golden orb. But before the situation can be resolved, a girl named Hannah appears and addresses the anatomical doll, calling it Taro. Taro, in a dramatic moment, shifts his focus and heads toward the girl, declaring that he won't give up on her no matter what. When he finally reaches her, he makes an unexpected confession. He says he did all of this because he loves her. To Taro, Hannah was the one who brought color to his otherwise gray world. As he watches this scene, Okaran can't help but notice the similarity between Taro and Hannah's relationship and his own connection with Momo. This leaves him deep in thought, wondering if he'll ever have the courage to confess his feelings for her the same way. And upon returning home with the doll they found at the dump, the three of them beg Seiko to let the doll live in her house. However, Seiko immediately disapproves of the idea. In response, Momo reminds her that they already take care of many cats, so bringing in a simple doll shouldn't be a big deal. At that moment, they question what happened to the doll's husband. Momo explains that he returned to the chemistry classroom now that he knows Hana is safe. Taro can resume his work as an anatomical model. However, Taro mentions that he plans to leave the school at night to meet Hana, but for that to happen, Hana needs a stable place to stay. Consequently, Okarun and the others resume pleading with Seiko to allow the doll to live in her house. After much insistence, Seiko finally gives in and permits the doll to stay. With that settled, Seiko changes the subject, asking about Okaran's ball, which was supposedly with the doll's husband. At this point, Momo disappoints Okaran by revealing that the ball was just a Christmas ornament, although it closely resembled his own ball. As they continue the conversation, Gigi praises Momo, acknowledging that her powers are indeed very useful in battle. He also compliments Okarun and his transformation, pointing out that without it, the fight would have been much more difficult. Furthermore, he remarks that the transformation was incredibly cool. While they chat, Gigi notices a bit of lint in Momo's hair and removes it for her. Seeing this interaction, Okarun interprets it as romantic, which makes him recall Taro's promise to Hana. Taro had vowed to always stay by Hana's side, emphasizing the importance of cherishing every moment together to avoid future regrets. Inspired by this, Okarun decides to apply the same principle to his own life. He approaches Momo and announces that he has made a decision. He then begins to hum a tune with a tone that suggests a declaration of affection for her. Suddenly, Gigi joins in, singing along with Okaran. Together, they start circling around Momo, much to her frustration. She yells at them to stop immediately, pointing out that they are disrupting her attempt to set the table. At this point, Seiko steps in, putting an end to the chaos by yelling at the boys. Finally, they cease their antics and allow peace to return to the household. Then, Seiko reminds Momo that she'll be staying at Gigi's house over the weekend and suggests she start preparing some clothes for the trip. Hearing that Momo will be staying at Gigi's house, Okaran is once again shocked. He nervously asks why, and Momo explains that Gigi's house is cursed and she needs to go there to exorcise the ghosts. Despite this explanation, Okaran focuses solely on the fact that Momo will be staying alone with Gigi at his house. Noticing his reaction, Momo clarifies that she was already planning to invite him along as well, since she wouldn't feel safe going to such a place without him. Upon hearing this, Okaran becomes enthusiastic and resolves to take care of the curse at Gigi's house as quickly as possible so that Gigi can return home sooner. Meanwhile, some students sneak into the school late at night to play with a Ouija board. However, they suddenly hear suspicious noises coming from a dark hallway. Moments later, Taro runs past them, dashing off toward Hana with great urgency. On his way though, he gets hit by a truck. Momo, on the other hand, starts to grow drowsy as she waits, but she reassures Hana that she will stay with her until her husband arrives. Momo firmly believes he'll show up eventually. As dawn breaks, Taro finally arrives, apologizing for the delay. Hana forgives him immediately, her love for him unconditional. Earlier that night, Gigi recalls the ghost he used to frequently see at his house. He admits that, even now, he still struggles to sleep normally due to the trauma caused by the spirit. The next morning, after boarding the train to Gigi's house, the group decides to snack on some treats along the way. However, Okaran keeps to himself, quietly observing how Momo and Gigi interact so effortlessly and intensively. Feeling sidelined in the conversation, Okaran begins to think of himself as limited and incapable of bridging the gap between them. To make matters worse, he becomes overwhelmed by his feelings of inadequacy, ultimately deciding to focus solely on retrieving his ball for now. Noticing Okaran looking distracted, Momo asks what's on his mind. Seeing his reaction, she assumes he's still obsessing over his ball and bursts into laughter. Meanwhile, Gigi, unaware of the context regarding Okaran's ball, misinterprets the situation. Thinking they're just making random jokes, he joins in by making exaggerated faces and silly expressions, causing Momo to nearly die of laughter. Seeing this, Okaran decides to do something to grab Momo's attention as well. He begins talking about the Tsuchinoko and how he believes they might be the next species to become an UMA, unidentified mysterious animal. This statement briefly captures Momo's interest, but Gigi quickly interrupts, recounting a legend from his village about a giant serpent that is worshipped at a 200-year-old temple. This shifts Momo's focus entirely to Gigi, leaving Okaran feeling ignored. Desperate to regain Momo's attention, Okaran frantically flips through his book, searching for a topic that might interest her. He mentions a story about a Kappa mummy and a temple where these creatures are revered. However, instead of catching Momo's attention, Okaran inadvertently piques Gigi's interest. Gigi engages him enthusiastically, leaving Momo momentarily out of the conversation. During their exchange, Gigi becomes so excited that he asks Okaran to officially make him part of his friendship circle. Caught off guard, Okaran apologizes awkwardly, admitting that he considers himself too clumsy and socially inept to maintain many friendships. Moving forward, the group arrives at a hot springs district. Gigi explains that his family lives in the area because his father is conducting research on volcanoes for a nearby university. With that said, they continue their journey, climbing several steep staircases before finally reaching Gigi's house. Upon arrival, Momo remarks that she hasn't sensed any suspicious aura so far. After exploring the house thoroughly, she slumps onto the couch and turns on the TV, confusing Okaran, who initially thought it had turned on by itself. Momo clarifies that she turned it on herself because she's bored due to the lack of ghosts to confront. Okaran begins to eye Gigi suspiciously, thinking the boy might have fabricated the ghost story as an excuse to bring Momo to his house. However, Momo reassures him that Gigi is telling the truth. She explains that several mediums who previously visited the house confirmed that it's cursed. Still, Momo suspects that the ghosts are simply hiding their presence, as weaker spirits tend to conceal themselves more easily. However, Momo assures them that the ghosts will likely show up during the night, and when they do, all they have to do is get rid of them. With that, she decides to head to the hot springs to relax while waiting for nightfall. She tells Okarun to stay at the house and have fun with Gigi. Concerned, Okarun asks what he should do if a spirit actually appears. Momo, completely at ease, assures him that she'll return before the end of the day, so there won't be enough time for the ghost to cause trouble. As Okarun watches her leave, he starts to panic and tells Gigi, who happens to be carrying the sweet drink Momo requested. Okarun informs him that she just went to the hot springs district, and hearing this, Gigi looks disappointed, wishing he could have gone with her. Realizing that he's now alone with Okarun, Gigi invites him to play soccer and begins teaching him how to properly kick the ball. Despite Gigi's guidance, Okarun performs terribly, clearly lacking any natural talent for the sport. Still, he feels relieved that Momo isn't around to see him embarrass himself. Taking the opportunity, Okarun decides to practice and improve so that he can impress Momo when he gets better. He starts daydreaming about her smiling and congratulating him for his incredible plays, which makes him completely lose focus. Suddenly, Gigi snaps him out of his daydream and, growing more straightforward, asks if Okarun likes Momo. Meanwhile, at the hot springs, Momo hopes that her two friends are getting along well. She knows that Gigi is Okarun's first male friend, and feels that her presence might interfere with their bonding time. Back with Okarun and Gigi, Gigi compliments Momo, saying she's truly adorable. He explains to Okarun that Momo was his first real friend, and because of that, he has great respect for her and considers her someone very special in his life. Gigi goes on to make slightly bolder compliments, expressing his admiration for her looks and personality. Feeling challenged, Okarun admits that he also appreciates those same qualities about her. Hearing this, Gigi is left confused, as he believed Okarun only saw Momo as a friend he respects. Okarun clarifies, explaining that respecting Momo doesn't mean he can't also admire her physical beauty. This sparks a playful competition between the two to determine who admires Momo more. During their argument, Gigi brings up the fact that he's been friends with Momo since childhood, making their bond much stronger. He declares himself the winner of the dispute. In response, Okarun recalls the time he accidentally kissed Momo. To him, that moment alone makes him the true winner of their rivalry. However, instead of sharing this detail with Gigi, Okarun simply claims victory, leaving Gigi frustrated. Gigi refuses to accept defeat, arguing that Okarun hasn't provided any real justification for his claim. Meanwhile, Momo decides to leave the hot springs, but before she can exit the water, a group of older men suddenly appears, threatening to join her in the bath. They point to a sign stating that the area is for mixed bathing, asserting their right to be there. Momo quickly realizes she's in a difficult situation as the men slowly close in on her, leaving her with no escape. Back at the house, Gigi and Okarun notice an unusual protrusion on the outside wall, suggesting the presence of a hidden room. Curious, they locate the interior wall that seems to correspond to the mysterious space. After knocking on it, they confirm it's hollow, proving there's something behind it. Determined to uncover the mystery, Gigi grabs a hammer and begins breaking through the wall. What they find on the other side shocks them, a room covered in talismans. At the same time, Momo is surrounded by the men in the hot spring, their intentions becoming increasingly threatening as they move closer and closer to her. That's the end of episode 12, so don't forget to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.